Welcome to Capitol Dateline Online. I'm with our guest, Jim Saunders, the executive editor of the News Service of Florida. Jim, right now there is a constitutional challenge on the funding of education that's happening at the court level. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's a Leon County Circuit judge heard 4 weeks of testimony in a case that's based on a 1998 constitutional amendment that passed that said basically that it's the paramount duty of the state to adequately provide for the public schools. And there's a group out of Gainesville who's filed a lawsuit several years ago. It's been working its way through the courts. And there was a 4-week hearing that just wrapped up in Leon County Circuit Court. The judge is going to have to decide whether the state has been adequately providing for public schools in the state. And if he decides that it is not, he's going to have to craft some sort of remedy, which might involve a lot of money. We're not really sure at this point how he's going to rule. He didn't really indicate, although he asked some pretty skeptical questions, it appeared, of the actual plaintiffs in the case, so we're not really sure. Of course, this could go on to appeals and even to the Supreme Court. There's been cases like this in other states, and they are very involved. They deal with funding, they deal with student performance, and one interesting twist in this case, or sort of a twist, if you will, is that there's been controversy in Florida for the past, really since 1998, when Jeb Bush got elected, about the direction of public schools in the state. And some of the debate during closing arguments was on, has the state made progress under that regime that Governor Bush put into place, and has pretty much remained in place through the years. There were two very different pictures of that. The plaintiffs in the case say, there's still vast problems in the public school system. The other side, the state, Department of Education, saying, hey, we've made so much progress over these years, and they lay out test scores and so on to prove their case. So it'll be interesting to see what the judge does, but it could have pretty far-reaching implications down the road.
Okay. Also hot right now, the governor is expected this week, coming up, to sign what's been called the Alimony bill. And there's some controversy over that. So let's talk about that.
The governor has gone through most of the bills that were filed during this legislative session. He's signed almost all of them. But this bill is probably drawing the most scrutiny, and it was the last bill sent to him. It's probably going to be the last bill he takes action on from this year's legislative session. It's very controversial. There's two parts of it, one of which would redo the state's alimony laws. Essentially, a major part of it, there's various components, but a major part of it would be to create a formula for judges to follow in determining how much alimony is paid out to in divorce cases. That formula would take into consideration numbers of years of marriage, income levels, so on. The controversy about that part of the bill has been that there have been and are primarily women, not exclusively, but primarily women, who have worked in the home for years, raised the kids, and then there's a divorce. And the concern of critics of that part of the bill are that those women would be at a severe disadvantage because they don't have job experience, income experience, or as much, and that it would be, that this could penalize them. The other side of it says, look, we need to essentially put in place something that's going to give more certainty in these alimony cases, and in terms of trying to cut down some of the litigation that goes on about amounts of alimony and so on. So that's one part of the bill.
And then the other part has to do with sharing children, right?
The other part, which I think a lot of people think if Governor Scott vetoes this bill, it's going to be because of the other part. And that is it's part of the bill that deals with child sharing in divorce situations. And the bill, Senate Appropriations Chairman Tom Lee, who's very influential, obviously, he's the budget chairman in the Senate, he's a former Senate president, has made this issue a priority of his, but also, as a result, the rest of the legislatures. But he wanted in the bill essentially going into divorce cases that judges would look at it as being that there should be equal child sharing between the two parents as they divorce. The bill doesn't go completely say that, but it says basically a judge would go into the case looking at equal child sharing and then could divert away from it. Mm-hmm. But there's been a lot of controversy about whether that's the right approach in these often really emotional and sometimes flat out nasty divorce cases, rancorous divorce cases, and whether that's in the best interest of the children. The family law section of the Florida Bar, for example, has worked on this issue for years in the legislature. This alimony reform is not a new issue. Mm-hmm. The Florida Bar family law section is okay with the alimony piece of this bill, but they're not okay with the child sharing piece.
In fact, wasn't there a bill that was vetoed in 2013 that was similar?
In 2013, there was an alimony bill that Governor Scott vetoed. Mm-hmm. Now, the issues were somewhat, the underlying alimony bill was not that much different. It was similar, at least a similar approach. There was one major difference in that bill, in that it would have applied the changes retroactively. So divorces that had already occurred would have been subject to the changes in that law. And Governor Scott didn't think that was fair, so he vetoed the bill. So that retroactivity is not an issue, or at least as much of an issue this year. But he's, I think a lot of people are thinking he's looking very closely at the child sharing component of this bill and whether that's goes too far. We know that in the final days of the legislative session, there was some negotiations going on behind the scenes to try to change some of that, or at least to somehow ameliorate the governor's concerns about that issue. Those changes didn't happen, or there was no additional legislation that would have ameliorated his concerns. So I think everybody's watching that, and that's probably going to be the highest profile bill left in terms of what he's going to do with it.
So do you have a prediction on whether he'll sign it or veto it?
I don't. I mean, you know, the legislative, the people in the legislature who have championed this are Senator Lee, who's the budget chairman in the Senate, and Representative Rich Workman, who's the House Rules Chairman. Right. I mean, those are two of the most influential positions in the legislature, and they're the ones who want this bill for different reasons. Workman wants the alimony part, and Lee wants the child sharing. Well, they probably want both, but you know, that's their focus. They've been their focuses. So you've got that at play, but then you've got these other issues about, these other critics of the bill are questioning whether it's going to be a fair framework in divorce cases. So I think, the governor hasn't really tipped his hand at this point, as he doesn't on most bills, but this is going to be something to watch over the next week.
It could go either way. Thanks, Jim. For more news about Florida government, politics, and public affairs, visit the advanced section of our website.